Yang gang. Got that Yang gang right here.
Yang for New York, Yang for New York. Represent the Yang gang for New York. Yang for New York, Yang for New York. We gon' do the right thing for New York.
So that snippet is just one painful representation of why Andrew Yang's campaign for mayor of New York City wasn't successful. In this video, we're going to talk about a series of unfortunate events that even a rap song couldn't fix that led to him losing the election in 4th place among other Democratic nominees. When we look back on the 2020 presidential election, actually, maybe we don't want to look back on that election.
And it's not what your party has said.
That is simply
your party
a lie.
doesn't say it. Your party wants to go socialist medicine.
My party is
and
me.
socialist
right
healthcare.
now, I am
and
the
they're going to
Democratic
dominate
Party.
you, Joe. You know that.
I am.
Okay, how about we just look back at Andrew Yang, who was a pretty decent candidate to follow. He had a pleasant personality, he had bold, innovative policies that were interesting to a lot of voters, and he didn't engage in as much of the ugly mudslinging that made the election so unpleasant to experience.
When it's not. Mr. Vice President, there's a saying in my community, you're dipping into the Kool-Aid and you don't even know the flavor.
Okay, that wasn't mudslinging, that was just lame. Let's try another one.
You didn't go to Delaware State. You graduated either the lowest or almost the lowest in your class. Don't ever use the word smart with me.
Despite not winning the election, Yang amassed a large voter base and exited the election as a generally well-liked candidate. And then he decided to run for mayor of New York City, where he started out strong and then tanked his campaign. And by the way, the election we're talking about isn't even the general election. We're talking about the primary election. So Andrew didn't even manage to secure the Democratic nomination despite having a national platform just last year.
So what did you screw up?
So just how bad was Andrew Yang's campaign for mayor?
Yang for New York, Yang for New York.
Up until the last few months of the election, not bad. He was leading in the polls, and the general consensus was that he would at least win the Democratic nomination, if not the entire election. But polls being wrong, where have we seen that before? The last few months of the campaign were terrible. So let's talk about the part of his campaign that sucked and lost him the election. Seeing New York the way it is now hurts my heart. The thought that I might be able to contribute to my city's revival is both an incredible responsibility and opportunity. What we do in the months ahead will determine our city's trajectory for decades to come. That's why I'm running for mayor. I want to serve my community in this time of need and bring bold, innovative solutions to the table. I want to lead us forward as we rise above our current politics. I want to see every last New Yorker thrive in our city. Yang entered his mayoral campaign with significant name recognition, a substantial lead over other candidates based on early poll numbers, and a strong donor base who funneled copious amounts of cash into his campaign. The platform for his mayoral campaign focused on local issues relative to New York City, as it should. His campaign focused on the following topics, as listed on his campaign website. Now, all of these policies sound great, but there was a clear disconnect between the campaign and the constituents of New York City. So let's talk about some of the major issues that had the most impact on Andrew's campaign. To start off, Andrew managed to get himself branded as a New York City tourist. New York City is a proud city, and there's a difference between being a true New Yorker and someone who just visits frequently or lives outside the city. Unfortunately for Yang, he was branded as a tourist, so not a true New Yorker.
Get along like we used to in middle school. I wish that I could bake a cake made out of rainbows and smiles, and we'd all eat it, be happy.
She doesn't even go here.
Do you even go to this school?
No, I just have a lot of feelings.
Okay, go home.
And by extension, not someone who should serve as the mayor, despite having lived in Manhattan since he was 21 years old. A few incidents led to this unfortunate characterization. During an interview with comedian Ziwe on her namesake show on SHOWTIME, Ziwe asked Yang what his favorite subway stop was.
Okay, what's your favorite subway station?
It's my stop, so Times Square. I've been in
Your
and out
favorite
of
subway
there.
station is Times Square?
It's big, it's cavernous. There are entertainers there. Sure, like, what's not to like?
You can see that Ziwe's immediate reaction here clearly indicates that this was not the right answer, and Twitter agreed. Another incident involved Yang leaving New York City during the pandemic. He is said to have been staying at a family home in the Hudson River Valley area, an area within New York, but outside of New York City. When asked why he left, Yang responded with the following quote: "Every New York parent has struggled with educating our children in a time of COVID. We took our 2 kids, including my autistic son, to upstate New York to help him adapt to our new normal. Evelyn and I know how lucky we are to have that option, which is why I've committed the past several years of my life to lifting up working families and eliminating poverty." Despite his explanation and insistence that leaving New York City was in the best interest of his family, critics felt his actions directly contradicted his campaign promise to fight for New York City families living in poverty. "We all stayed here and fought for New York. The people I respect are the people who stayed here," said Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer. Democratic strategist Leah Daughtry also weighed in. "Anybody who's running for mayor, no matter their name recognition, is going to have to demonstrate to people that they understand the problems of folks. It's not like any place else." Andrew attempted to point out the inaccuracy and hypocrisy of his opponents attacking him for temporarily relocating during the pandemic.
Mr. Yang, we're going to begin with you. This morning, Eric Adams informed us that he had changed his mind about participating in this debate after refusing the invitation earlier in the week. About the same time, a published report came out questioning his residency. Do you believe that Mr. Adams lives in New York City?
I'm glad Eric is here. Thank you on behalf of the voters of New York City, Eric. But I want to reflect, Maurice, on the oddness and the bizarreness of where we are in this race right now, where Eric is literally trying to convince New Yorkers where he lives and that he lives in this basement. And it's troubling because Eric, unfortunately, has not only been not straightforward, but he's been hypocritical. He spent months attacking me for not being a New Yorker. Meanwhile, he was attacking me from New Jersey.
He tried to point out that he did in fact live in the area and that the criticism was ridiculous. Which is true, but that's kind of the point of trivial criticisms. They're surprisingly effective because you can just throw them out there, and they're sometimes hard to shake because of how simple and easy to remember they are. If these missteps weren't enough to turn voters off, it was later revealed that Andrew Yang, a candidate for mayor of New York City, had failed to vote in the 2000 and 2012 presidential elections and failed to vote in the last 4 New York City mayoral elections. So, your platform talks about the dangers of climate change, but you didn't vote for Al Gore, and you mentioned receiving accolades from President Obama, but didn't vote for him in the 2012 election? Okay. In an interview with The Hill, when asked about his voting record, or lack thereof, he responded as follows: "I think I'm one of a large number of New Yorkers who perhaps didn't have strong allegiances one way or another to a candidate. The nomination process has been something that has been dominated by folks who've been longtime figures in city politics, typically, and I think I, and many other New Yorkers, saw city politics and didn't think it was going to be as central to the success or failure of the city because times were good and very prosperous, and there was a sense of security in New York City." There is so much wrong with this statement that I don't even know where to start, and I just need to know who told him this response was a good idea. You're basically saying that you only vote when things are bad, and you're acknowledging that there's a large portion of the population, including yourself, who does not vote. And that's okay, but make sure you vote for me? Elections are won when people who do not typically participate in politics are inspired enough by a candidate to vote for them. When the candidate themselves doesn't find voting important, then why the hell would anyone else find it important to vote for them? Unbelievable. Failure to vote in multiple elections aside, when you think of Andrew Yang, you may think of a generally nice, personable guy who wouldn't really say anything disrespectful or particularly controversial. Unfortunately, a video posted on Twitter by a local comedian showed Yang laughing along with a man who made some disparaging comments about women and sexual activity.
Can a man keep his temper?
Can a man keep his Timbs on?
Yeah. Because a man keep his Timbs on.
Oh my! I mean, I really.
Oh Lord.
I'm in disbelief.
I think it's purely up to your partner, right? I mean, if your partner is
Consensual.
cool with it,
That's what I'm saying.
I love Andrew Yang.
A group of female elected officials went so far as releasing a statement claiming that the video is, quote, disqualifying for someone who is seeking to be mayor of New York City. Of course, Andrew responded to the backlash.
I think most New Yorkers know that I try and be friendly to people, and in this case, someone wanted a video, and I thought I'd be friendly. But then, I know he said something that was plainly inappropriate that I didn't find funny at all.
I actually believe Andrew. I do think he was being nice and agreeing to film the video and got caught off guard with the questions and then just awkwardly laughed and walked off. But when you're campaigning to become a leader, specifically the leader of New York City as mayor, you can't make this type of mistake. Even though Andrew didn't make a single disparaging comment, the fact that he laughed during the interaction made it seem as if he condoned the behavior and thought those comments were funny. Women in particular were really put off by how he handled the situation. Fresh off the misogynistic video controversy, Yang found himself in hot water for a comment he actually did make, this time regarding the homeless population in New York City during the mayoral debate on June 16th.
This question is so important because the fact is mentally ill, homeless men are changing the character of our neighborhoods. A woman my wife Evelyn is friends with in her mom group in Hell's Kitchen was punched in the face by a mentally ill man. Sent a picture of her bruised face around the mom group, spread like wildfire. This is happening in New York City and we're not talking enough about it. Families are leaving as a result. In East Harlem, the neighborhood has been changed. Upper West Side, the neighborhood has been changed. We owe our people and our families better than this, and I'm frustrated by the political nature of these responses. I mean, we're not talking about housing affordability. We're talking about the hundreds of mentally ill people we all see around us every day on the streets and the subways. We need to get them off of our streets and our subways into a better environment. And when you ask what I'm going to do differently, I'm going to rebuild the stock of psych beds in our city because the number's gone down 14%. It should be going up 100% until there are resources necessary for anyone who's mentally ill to not be on our streets. It's not right for them. It's not right for our city. There will be no recovery until we resolve this. I will fix this, New York.
Thank you, Mr. Yang.
So you're in the middle of a campaign debate talking about how homeless people, specifically those who are homeless due to circumstances outside of their control, mental illness, need to be removed from the streets and subways of New York City because they are an inconvenience for you. Never mind the fact that you're saying this while we're in the middle of a pandemic and resources to help these people are especially scarce. If lack of empathy had a face, it would be Andrew Yang in this moment. So let's switch over to discussing Andrew Yang, the entrepreneur. We briefly touched on his nonprofit organization earlier in this video. Throughout both of his campaigns, Yang mentions Venture for America numerous times. The organization was generally considered successful until a New York Times article showed that, instead of the 100,000 jobs the organization had claimed to have created, only around 150 jobs had been created. This revelation severely hurt Yang's credibility as an entrepreneur. So, now there are disparities in his overall campaign message about caring about the city where he failed to vote in previous mayoral elections and fled during the pandemic. You can't run a progressive and inclusive campaign where the candidate's objective to create an anti-poverty city seems to be centered around getting rid of the homeless population rather than establishing reformative policies to provide support and care for the homeless. And when the candidate's nonprofit organization, which has been touted as an example of successful business management and philanthropy, is exposed as having far less impact than implied by the campaign, you're no longer seen as a good guy who just wants to give back to his community. Couple that with misogyny, and you've got a nosediving campaign right before the election. So, how does someone who made it to the debate stage during a presidential election fail to even win their party's nomination for a local mayoral campaign? One thing is that national and local campaigns are very different. Issues that affect the masses are not necessarily top of mind for constituents at the state, city, county level. Is universal basic income really the most important issue for people locally? This type of concept does well at the national level, where you reach millions of people from all walks of life, and you're likely to find a group of people who connect with what you're saying. But at the local level, you end up on the offensive, trying to sell an idea that people are not inclined to get behind because they're either concerned with other issues that they find more pressing because they actually affect their day-to-day lives, or this is just not the right audience for this particular issue. Yang had a lot of great ideas, but failed to demonstrate that he also thoroughly understood and planned to address the specific local issues affecting New York City. A major Achilles heel with the Yang campaign was that the platform connected mostly with younger voters. However, younger voters are notorious for not showing up to the polls, and you can't run a millennial or Gen Z friendly campaign and drop the ball on issues that these age groups value most. On June 22, 2021, Yang ended his campaign for mayor when it became clear that the numbers just weren't in his favor. So what did you think of Yang's campaign? Leave your thoughts in the comments below and let me know in the comments what type of video you want to see next. Is there another politician you want me to cover? Maybe a concept like universal basic income, etc.? But before you leave, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this one. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one.
We gon' do the right thing for New York, Yang for New York, Yang for New York. Represent the Yang gang for New York.